Hey YouTube, so you saw my last video about how I made this template, and now I'm going to show you some things you can do with the template. For one thing, it's very hard to measure accurately through all these bumps and dives. So here's something you can do. If you, let me cut a little straight edge on here. If you take this pattern, and it doesn't matter which one you use. I'm going to use this one because it's sort of like an outside curve type thing. So I'm going to start where I want the panel right there, and I'm going to roll this, follow that contour, okay, and I'm going to cut this off here right at the end. Oh, if I give myself just a little hair there, it's not going to matter whether I have a little bit or not, but sometimes I've measured these and it's been really hard. That's right at the edge. Now what I can do with this is I take the tape then and I lay it out without stretching it, and I just measure it. Okay, you can measure it with whatever you want. I'll use this, so I'm off 2 inches there, so 9 and minus 2 is 7, so it's 7 1/4 inches for the length of the tape. The only reason I'm doing that is because on the end of these, this adjusts for when you're pulling and pushing in the corner, and I just like to start where I can see whole numbers there. So this actually 9 minus 2 that's hanging over is 7 1/4 inches. So that tells me then, and you see I have it already written here from when I did make this, it's 7 1/4 inches. I don't know if you can see that. And I'm going to cut it 7 3/8 inches. So I'm giving myself 1/8 of an inch. And what that's for is that is to actual size of the steel. So out of a great big panel, out of a 3 foot or 4 foot wide panel, I took and measured and put lines in there, and you can see that's 7 3/8 inches. Okay, or if you can't, take my word for it. And what I do is I cut the panel then. So that's 7 3/8 panel. Now that gives me the panel that has the exact bends, the exact offsets in it, and I don't have to worry about whether I have enough steel or not. In fact, till I get done hammering it, it'll probably stretch slightly, but it all depends on how hard I hit it and how I handle the steel. So that's one way of using that to get the exact length. So all I did was cut a piece of tape, lay it upside down, put it there, and let the tape stick through all the dips and dives and everything else that's on there, and then, you know, put it where it belongs as far as the piece goes. And you can see I cut, it gets 1/8 of an inch longer. Okay, I actually measured it. I measured 7 1/4, I cut it 7 3/8, just to give myself enough. That 1/8 of an inch is my security blanket. Okay, so then, let me go get the panel and I'll show you what I do with that then. Now this panel that I have here actually has a start of the bend in it there. But what I'll show you is how I would start that just to get going. Now this tape is on here because that's the straight edge that I use to cut the steel. And what I use to cut the steel, just hang in there with me and I'll show you all this stuff. I bought this thing at Harbor Freight, and even though I hate freaking China, because these Chinese, everything they make is practically junk, I bought this at Harbor Freight. It's a cutter for sheet metal, and it does work pretty good. Chicago Electric. What pisses me off, or what upsets me about this, is it says Chicago on it, making me think it's made in the U.S., only to find out it's Chicago, Shanghai, or somewhere. Anyway, I use that to cut my piece, and I'll cut the piece along a piece of tape, and this way here I can keep a nice straight line. I can see the line easy with this orange tape, and I like this stuff too. This is Rust-Oleum brand tape, and that's not bad. It's very comparable to 3M. But anyway, I cut along that and I got my 7 3/8 inch piece. Once I have that 7 3/8 inch piece there, then I take my pattern okay, and I'll put it this direction. Alright, so I'll just see if I can show you this. So I'll put it this direction, and what I'll do is I'll hold it right on the edge there, the corner, and then I'll roll halfway through that bend, and that is where I'll put a mark. Now I'm trying to hold this at the same time and mark it, but you get the idea. So in other words, if I could hold that with two hands, I would end there, and it would be somewhere about right there is where I would have the middle of my bend. Okay, so that's about the middle of the bend. So I'll take and I'll scribe a line, whatever that distance is. You can either scribe it or measure it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sixteenths. So 1 and 5 sixteenths. I can go ahead and mark that all the way along the panel, and then I'll show you what I did with that. So here's the panel now, and this tape represents the 1 and 5 sixteenths in there, or slightly less. It's pretty much it. And what I did was I took this, put it into the V block of my log that I have. I have a log cut in with a V cut into it. And what I did was I started hammering. You can see the hammer marks. I started hammering all around there. As this falls into the V, it starts to make a shape. Now originally what it did, you can see at the edge here, this is actually fairly straight. It's fairly flat. Okay, let me just move that tape. Before, this was all bending in a round shape, and I had to flatten that out. And unfortunately I didn't make the video showing that. But if you look here, you'll see how this helps me to be able to guide myself where to go with that. If you look at the end of the tape, you'll see that that's where the, well, sorry about that guys, I didn't see it wasn't in the camera. So I put that against the metal, and you can see at the end of the tape is roughly where that bend starts down in here, this bend. So I have it even up here. I have that mark. I started hammering through it, and you can see that I've already got the flat part of the panel, and part of the bend is already done. So all I need to do is actually bend this a little more. Now if you look closely at this, you'll see that this is a continuous bend here, okay? And you can tell that by holding something flat on there. You can see that that's a bend, it's not flat. Alright, and then there's another bend after that. So what I'll do is, because that bend is very subtle, I'll work through that bend to where I'm touching down here, and then there I'll put another bend and bring it the rest of the way. But just within a couple of minutes, I already have, you know, 1 inch and say a half of the panel made, and it's a 7-inch panel. So that's how I go about starting to get the panels made. And I use this template and different points on it to mark things. For instance, I might mark the center of this radius. I might mark where this radius starts, and then I'll mark down in here where these other radiuses start and end, or the center of them I should say. And that's how I'll go about marking. I'll take that and mark the panel accordingly, and that's how I'll put the bends in there. Now you need to do a little bit of thinking here, because sometimes especially if you're going to use a brake to get a bend, you may have to bend things backwards. In other words, you may have to start back here because a bend won't allow you to get back into the brake. So you have to think that through. And what you could do if you really wanted to, now I'm working with this 3-foot panel here. I would suggest that if you're just getting started with this, what you could do is cut yourself the 7 1/4 wide and then another maybe 4-inch wide piece. And start with that little piece and make yourself a template from that. Let your template be only a small 4-inch wide metal, so that what will happen is you'll learn where to hit it to get it to bend, and then you'll learn how to measure it. Okay? So in other words, on here, as you see this thing, I'm going to put the marks. I'm just going to hold it on an angle here. I will put the mark here, 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 and here. And till I'm done with that, this panel will be shaped like that. It'll fit in there. It may look a little long now, but it'll fit in there once I put all those bends in there. So that's how I go about marking this and putting the bends in. So in other words, that bend there was the one that was 1 5/16 in, and that mark is already up there. So then I'll put the next bend in after I'm shaping it there. I'll put a mark and I'll put a line all the way along the panel. And that's how I go about following straight lines to make a bent panel. Okay? And just to give you a little preview here of how I go about making this shape, this is the log that I was talking about that I have. Just the camera a little bit, guys. This is the log I have. Zoom in a little bit. All it is it's just cut fairly straight. It's nothing, no big deal here, but what you got to recognize is that this is higher than this to give me some swinging room in this direction. I also have a bend there that I can work with. So what I do here is I'll take this and I'll turn this around because I want to be able to hit this with my hammer easily, and if this is too high I end up hitting that instead of hitting this. So then I'll take this and just sort of lay it in there and start bumping along where I have the tape. Now I keep the tape there because the tape sort of forces my hand and my eye to follow along the edge of it. You can see where I pinged the tape a little bit there, and so all I did was take a flat piece, lay it on there, and start hammering it in. And as I hammer it, you'll see the piece goes down as I hit it and forms that curve. So that's how I've gotten that first curve in there, and that's how far like I say, I've got with that. Now if you look down it, I don't know if you can see down that very well, but it's not perfectly straight, but it's not bad. And I can straighten that by either putting it in my shrinker or just keep working it with the hammer. And right now it has a little bit of a dimpled finish to it because I'm not done with it. I'll just keep hammering that, and if worst case scenario, if you can't get all the hammer marks out, you can always use body putty to bridge some of that stuff because it's not very thick, and you're going to use body putty anyway, or the fiberglass filler to hide the weld. So I mean, there's ways to do that and not hide the weld, and you can work with it, but you know, you got to have more than a little bit of experience to do that. You have to be able to have done this for a couple of years, I would say, before you can get to that point. But anyway, that's how I would use this log for that. Also, like you can see where I have the hammer there, from the inside of that tape, I'll hammer along this to flatten this out here, because originally this had formed a curve when I started making it, so I needed it to be flat. So I just hold it in there and start working across there to flatten that all up. Alright guys, so that's that's actually the next step to where I go to make these things happen, these panels. And one of the things that I did not say that I would like to say is, not only can you do that, let me zoom back here a little bit, not only can you make those panels like to the bottom, like say of this quarter panel, you can lay a piece of cardboard on here, and that's what I use, real thin cardboard. You can put cardboard in here, or not construction paper, but the other, oh boy, I forget what they call that board, but they have it for school kids. But anyway, you put that in here, you can get the actual shape of this whole fender into that, okay, the whole piece, and then do it in the back and get it some other measurements, and you can actually make them pretty nice. So alright guys, that's where I go after I made the template, and how I use the template to give me the exact measurements I need of where to put the bends. So what you need to understand here, and what I'd like you to understand, is that I'm working with curves, but I'm only working with straight lines to give me the curves, to tell me where the curves are. Now there's some other stuff that, you know, you have to learn, like if you're going to make a panel that wraps around here, then you have to hammer that curve into there. That's slightly different. That's a little more advanced work. And I can show you that as I go. Same thing with this one. If you lay a cardboard along here, you can get a nice shape for that body panel. It's not hard to do. Any part of the door, you know, if you had something at the top of the bed here, you just lay the panel in here, along here, scribe it with a pencil like I showed you. You just lay the pencil down, scribe it down there, and got what you need to make these repairs. And the thing is you might be asking, well, why don't I just buy them? I can buy them. It's not that I can't buy them. It's that I enjoy working with metal, and let me just put it to you like this. A piece of sheet metal like this, to do those rockers, and this is, the inflated price would be about $3 a square foot for this sheet metal. Okay, this is 18 gauge, so $3 a square foot. Now there's roughly 4 square foot there because it's only 7 inches wide. You can do the math if you want, but you take that, I need 3 of those to do the one panel. If I send away for a panel, the rocker panel for this Suburban is $185 for a sort of a, I'll say, a Chinese knockoff, and it's $285 or more for the original panel from GM that I can put on there. This man does not want to spend $285 for just that, because he has that as well as this, and the next thing you know, you're adding up, you know, you're well over $2,000-3,000 to fix a car that's got 250,000 miles on it. And just because the engine runs good, you know, I still don't think that you should put a whole lot of money into it. Now it depends, you know, a new Suburban is what, $65,000? So it's going to cost him a lot less to do what I'm doing than it is for him to buy a brand new Suburban. So anyway, like I say, that panel from one end to the other end is $285 from Chevy. So I can make those panels, 3 pieces of steel, for roughly 4 square feet, roughly. So that's 12 times 3 is $36 for the same panel. Alright, that's the cost. And my labor, since I'm doing this as favors most of the time, people just give me what they want, and I'm pretty much satisfied with that, within reason. Sometimes I gotta say, well, I need a little more because they're not paying for the metal or whatever, but that's what I'm doing. And you can do the same thing at home and save yourself some money. I mean, you know, I don't know if I ever said this in my videos, but when I was a builder, I had an electrician work for me, and I asked him if he could do me some favors, and he told me that you know, doing favors doesn't put any food on the table, because the kids won't eat favors. So putting this money in your pocket rather than in someone else's is a better thing. Alright, it makes you a little bit more richer, plus the knowledge that it took to learn this. Alright guys, so that's where I'm at with that steel so far. I'll show you as I do the rest of the panel. Bye.